Meaning of a dividend is when the company has generated earnings over and above its debt obligations, it may choose to reward its shareholders from this excess earnings. The reward that gets distributed amongst shareholders is called as a dividend. Distributing dividend is not very straightforward because there are certain factors that can influence the decision of dividend payouts. Starting first with the contractual restrictions, this factor may restrict the company from paying dividends to the shareholders if it violates any of the provisions that is mentioned in the bond indenture or any such agreements. So bond indenture is basically a contract between the bond issuer and the bond holder that defines all the terms. Also, creditors and preference shareholders are given priorities over the ordinary shareholders. Second is taxation. If the dividends that are paid are taxed at a higher rate, then lower dividend payout is preferred. But if in case the dividends are taxed at a lower rate, then higher dividend payout is preferred. Third factor is investment opportunities. So there are such companies when they have an opportunity for a profitable investment or its expansion, they need to be dependent on internal financing, that is retained earnings. The reason is they do not have easy access to external financing. Now, because the company is heavily dependent on retained earnings, dividend payouts may be low or nil. Next is earnings. Those companies having stable earnings are more likely to pay higher dividends in contrast to those companies having volatile earnings. And the last one is liquidity. Dividends may not be paid if in case it affects the liquidity needs of the company. These are not an entire set of factors, but I have listed most of them. Now, besides these factors, there is also a connection between the life cycle of a company and a dividend policy. Let's see how. This is the life cycle of a company. At the first and second stage come startups and rapid expansion companies. They are very high growing firms with large investment opportunities. Now, because they are at a very initial stage, their internally generated cash is either low or negative. They are forced to be dependent on external source for capital. Because of all these reasons, such companies are unable to pay dividends. At stage 3, companies pay dividends but still at a very lower rate. And at the last two stage, mature and declining companies hold more earned equity but lack investment opportunities to grow. So they tend to pay more of their earnings out as dividends. We saw how factors and life cycle affect dividend policies. Next, we'll see types of dividend policies. Companies follow certain patterns while paying out dividends. The dividend patterns are based on the previously mentioned factors and the life cycle, of course. First type is paying constant dividend. Under this, the company pays out a fixed percentage of its earnings as a dividend to its shareholders. For example, company A may decide to pay a fixed 10% of net earnings as dividends. Now, dividend payments in this case is directly related to earnings, which is why any fluctuations in earnings will impact the amount of dividend paid. Second is irregular dividends. In this type, companies cannot pay regular dividends to its shareholders. There can be various reasons, like they have abnormal profits or face liquidity issues. In other words, shareholders in such companies cannot expect regular dividend payments periodically. Next is residual dividend. Under this category, companies use their profits first for capital expenditures and then pay the remaining amount as a dividend to its shareholders. And the last is no dividend. We saw earlier in the life cycle that the companies at the growth stage are not willing to pay dividends because they want to use it for funding the growth opportunities. Such policy may discourage the investors who are aiming for consistent payments, but the investors who stay for long may enjoy the benefits of capital appreciation in the future. Okay, that's about it. See you in the next video.